Hi, peace lovers. It's December, and I'm still practicing my Kitty Compost voice. For these last couple of weeks of the year, I've gathered 17 holiday inspired public domain readings from writers like L. Frank Baum, Henry David Thoreau, and Charles Dickens. It's a bit quirky, I know, but so is Kitty, and so is the new Peace podcast series arriving right here on New Year's Day, the Peace Experiments, Experiment Zero. A humming government facility, a skeptical fact-checking goat, and a classroom full of teens collide when reporter Kitty Ocampos begins investigating the myths that keep peace just out of reach. The peace experiments explore what happens when young people finally ask the questions adults avoid. And perhaps you've been hearing the Next Peacelands here on the podcast. We'll be returning soon to the practice of holding peaceful intention for the specific war zones and the countries that supply weapons to them. But during this stretch of Kitty Reed's Holiday Lit for Peace, the Next Peacelands will simply offer the names of some of the spiritual organizations working quietly and steadily for peace. You can add your own peace intentions to their hopeful rivers of peace if you choose to stay through the end of this episode. As always, the creative books and projects I make for peace can be found at aviskalfsbeek.com, and the music for the Next Peacelands comes from the talented Javier Peque Rodriguez. Joy and peace to you and yours, and to the world. Now over to Kitty. Today's reading comes from William Dean Howells, one of America's great realists and a man who believed that literature ought to pay close attention to ordinary life. He wasn't interested in melodrama so much as the choices people make when no spotlight is shining, the small ethical turns that build a society from the ground up. As editor of the Atlantic Monthly, he helped steer American letters toward clearer, truer storytelling, encouraging writers to drop the fancy costumes and tell things as they actually are. Now, Christmas Every Day, published in 1892, is one of his lighter pieces, a playful children's story with a grown-up sense of irony. It imagines what happens when a holiday meant to encourage generosity gets multiplied past all reason. Howells had a sharp eye for the difference between sentiment and substance, and this story shows him poking at the good way intentions can wobble when folks forget the real work behind them. We'll read just a short piece today, enough to hear Howells' steady humor and notice the lesson tucked beneath the mischief. The kindness means more when it's practiced in proportion, not piled up like a sale bin in a department store. Well, honey, I could read you the print off a store-bought wish list if it helped to see the line between wanting more and meaning more. Good writers remind us that moderation is its own kind of peace, especially when nobody, for goodness sake, is holding a gosh darn gun. Following is an excerpt from Christmas Every Day by William Dean Howells. The little girl came into her papa's study as she always did Saturday morning before breakfast and asked for a story. He tried to beg off that morning, for he was very busy, but she would not let him. So he began. Well, once there was a little pig. She put her hand over his mouth and stopped him at the word. She said she had heard little pig stories till she was perfectly sick of them. Well, what kind of story shall I tell then? About Christmas. It's getting to be the season. It's past Thanksgiving already. It seems to me, her papa argued, that I've told as often about Christmas as I have about little pigs. No difference. Christmas is more interesting. Well, her papa roused himself from his writing by a great effort. Well, then, I'll tell you about the little girl that wanted it Christmas every day in the year. How would you like that? First rate, said the little girl, and she nestled into comfortable shape in his lap, ready for listening. Very well, then, this little pig. Oh, what are you pounding me for? Because you said little pig instead of little girl. I should like to know what's the difference between a little pig and a little girl that wanted it Christmas every day. Papa, said the little girl warningly, if you don't go on, I'll give it to you. And at this, her papa darted off like lightning and began to tell the story as fast as he could. Well, once there was a little girl who liked Christmas so much that she wanted it to be Christmas every day in the year. And as soon as Thanksgiving was over, she began to send postal cards to the old Christmas fairy to ask if she mightn't have it. But the old fairy never answered any of the postals, and after a while the little girl found out that the fairy was pretty particular and wouldn't notice anything but letters, not even correspondence cards and envelopes, but real letters on sheets of paper and sealed outside with a monogram, or your initial anyway. So then she began to send her letters, and in about 3 weeks, or just the day before Christmas it was, she got a letter from the fairy saying she might have it Christmas every day for a year, and then they would see about having it longer. The little girl was a good deal excited already, preparing for the old-fashioned once-a-year Christmas that was coming the next day, and perhaps the fairy's promise didn't make such an impression on her as it would have made at some other time. She just resolved to keep it to herself and surprise everybody with it as it kept coming true, and then it slipped out of her mind altogether. She had a splendid Christmas. She went to bed early so as to let Santa Claus have a chance at the stockings, and in the morning she was up the first of anybody and went and felt them and found hers all lumpy with packages of candy and oranges and grapes and pocketbooks and rubber balls and all kinds of small presents, and her big brothers with nothing but the tongs in them, and her young lady sisters with a new silk umbrella, and her papas and mammas with potatoes and pieces of coal wrapped up in tissue paper, just as they always had every Christmas. Then she waited around till the rest of the family were up, and she was the first to burst into the library when the doors were opened and look at the large presents laid out on the library table, books and portfolios and boxes of stationery and breastpins and dolls and little stoves and dozens of handkerchiefs and inkstands and skates and snow shovels and photograph frames and little easels and boxes of watercolors and Turkish paste and nougat and candied cherries and dolls' houses and waterproofs, and the big Christmas tree lighted and standing in a wastebasket in the middle. She had a splendid Christmas all day. She ate so much candy that she did not want any breakfast, and the whole forenoon the presents kept pouring in that the expressman had not had time to deliver the night before, and she went round giving the presents she had got for other people, and came home and ate turkey and cranberry for dinner, and plum pudding, and nuts, and raisins, and oranges, and more candy, and then went out and coasted, and came in with a stomach ache, crying, and her papa said he would see if his house was turned into that sort of fool's paradise another year. And they had a light supper, and pretty early everybody went to bed cross. Here the little girl pounded her papa in the back again. Well, what now? Did I say pigs? You made them act like pigs. Well, didn't they? No matter, you oughtn't put that into a story. Very well, then, I'll take it out. Her father went on. The little girl slept very heavily, and she slept very late. But she was wakened at last by the other children dancing round her bed with stockings full of presents in their hands. What is it? Said the little girl, and she rubbed her eyes and tried to rise up in bed. Christmas, 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 they all shouted and waved their stockings. Nonsense, it was Christmas yesterday. Her brothers and sisters just laughed. We don't know about that, it's Christmas today anyway. You come into the library and see. Then all at once it flashed on the little girl that the fairy was keeping her promise, and her year of Christmases was beginning. She was dreadfully sleepy, but she sprang up like a lark that had overeaten itself and gone to bed cross, and darted into the library. There it was again, books and portfolios and boxes of stationery and breastpins. You needn't go over it all, Papa. I guess I can remember just what was there, said the little girl. Well, and there was the Christmas tree blazing away, and the family picking out their presents, but looking pretty sleepy, and her father perfectly puzzled, and her mother ready to cry. "I'm sure I don't see how I'm to dispose of all these things," said her mother, and her father said it seemed to him they had had something just like it the day before, but he supposed he must have dreamt it. This struck the little girl as the best kind of joke, and so she ate so much candy she didn't want any breakfast, and went round carrying presents, and had turkey and cranberry for dinner, and then went out and coasted, and came in with a "Papa." "Well, what now?" "What did you promise, you forgetful thing?" Oh, yes." Well, the next day it was just the same thing over again, but everybody's getting crosser, and by the end of the week's time, so many people had lost their tempers that you could pick up lost tempers anywhere. They perfectly strewed the ground. Even when people tried to recover their tempers, they usually got somebody else's, and it made the most dreadful mix. The little girl began to get frightened, keeping the secret all to herself. She wanted to tell her mother, but she didn't dare to, and she was ashamed to ask the fairy to take back her gift. It seemed ungrateful and ill-bred, and she thought she would try to stand it, but she hardly knew how she could for a whole year. So it went on, and it was Christmas on St. Valentine's Day and Washington's birthday, just the same as any day, and it didn't skip even the 1st of April, though everything was counterfeit that day, and that was some little relief. After a while, coal and potatoes began to be awfully scarce. So many had been wrapped up in tissue paper to fool papas and mamas with. Turkeys got to be about $1,000 apiece. "Papa." "Well, what?" "You're beginning to fib." "Well, 2,000 then." Thank you for listening and allowing me to practice Kitty's reporting voice for the big story ahead. Now stay with me a few minutes longer if you're able for the Next Peacelands. Following is a special holiday edition of the Next Peacelands, where we pause on listing the war zones and weapons suppliers. Instead, we rest our intention of peace on a few of the spiritual organizations working tirelessly toward peace. While this list is far from comprehensive, the total number of organizations, large and small, would number in the thousands if we included all who work daily for peace. I ask that you consider taking this time to add your own intention of peace to those working daily toward that goal. Mennonite Central Committee. Peace is here. Community of Santa Hidio. Peace is here. The Network for Religious and Traditional Peacemakers. Peace is here. Religions for Peace. Peace is here. Pax Christi International. Peace is here. American Friends Service Committee. Peace is here. Lutheran Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. The International Fellowship of Reconciliation. Peace is here. Baptist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Community Peacemaker Teams. Peace is here. Episcopal Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Friends Peace Teams. Peace is here. Muslim Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Buddhist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Quaker Peace and Social Witness. Peace is here. Network of Christian Peace Organizations. Peace is here. Network of Spiritual Progressives. Peace is here. United Religions Initiative. Peace is here. The Christian Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Peace is here. Agape International Spiritual Center. Peace is here.